Alright, so this video is a bit late, but I'm going to be wrapping up and giving my honest thoughts on my experience going all the way up north to campaign in the Makerfield by-election for Restore Britain. So what do I think's going to happen? What was my experience like? What did I think of it? And what did I learn? Etc, etc. So I'll first talk about how it went. I got up at stupid o'clock, 5 a.m, in order to walk all the way over to Ryde Pier, take the cat across to get to Portsmouth Harbour. Then I took a train from Portsmouth to London Waterloo. Then I went up north to London Euston, and obviously by the tube. And then I took a high-speed train from, well, you know, one of those cross-country trains. I don't know what they're called, but you know, they're very expensive. They're the ones that take you to major cities and up and down the country. Anyway, I took one of those trains to Wigan. And by the time I arrived there, it was 2:45 p.m. So the journey in total was around 10 hours. It was very exhausting, as you can imagine. And it was very expensive too. Yes, my wallet and my financial statement certainly won't be looking too kindly on me, having made this journey. I walked some 30 minutes, I don't know how many miles that is, all the way up to Shevington, which is in North Wigan, to find an Airbnb, which I'd booked, and I stayed there for the weekend. And in terms of what the Airbnb was like, well, it was very primitive in terms of amenities. There wasn't really much. It was literally just a queen-size bed in a small room, and that was pretty much it. There was a TV there, but I could barely get it to work properly. The remote buttons were stiff, and I had to press each button really hard, and it was a very old model. There was a feature that supposedly allowed you to connect your laptop to it via AirPlay, but after almost half an hour of trying to suss that out, I got frustrated and gave up. There wasn't even a desk, so I remember my room was being, you know, strewn with dirty clothes and all my belongings. It was very untidy. I mean, it was a budget Airbnb stay. I don't know if this is typical of most Airbnb stays, but I don't know if that's part of the course. But, well, you know, while it wasn't the most pleasant stay, it was in a relatively convenient location. It was a short walk away from the bus stop, which I could use to get to Wigan town centre, and from there I could go around and connect and carpool with other patriots who were on their way to the canvassing. Anyway, so I arrived on Friday afternoon, and I made it just in time to attend a canvassing session on Friday late afternoon. The following day, Saturday and Sunday, were these big action days that we had planned for Restore Britain's campaign. These were the days where Rupert Lowe himself had showed up to give a rousing speech to all of us. You can watch the speech online. People have posted pictures of it. I recorded segments of it. And honestly, by my reckoning, there must have been at least 1,000 of us there. Certainly far more than anyone for the Reform canvassing team. And I imagine far more still for Labour's. Shocking though it may be, there were Labour canvassers walking around. We did actually see them, but anyway, that's a different subject. So I basically, the way it worked was, I would fall into groups of no more than 5, and we would all form a team. One of us would be carrying the clipboard of a list of all these different addresses within a specific locality in and around Makerfield. We would organize ourselves so that one of us would take odd number houses, the other would take even numbers, at other times we would just sort of bunny hop, where one of us would knock on one door, the next would knock on the door after, and then we would knock on the door after theirs, and so on and so on. We weren't knocking on each individual door. It was doors where we hadn't collected data from, because what we were trying to establish, what we were trying to do is establish which each occupant of each house was, whether they were considering voting for us or not. It's not whether they were voting for Labour or Greens or Reform or anything like that. It's just, are you voting for a store or not? And if not, if they were undecided, we would engage in a conversation with them. We'd give them a leaflet and a program explaining who we were and why, and we would try to convince them why they ought to vote for us. And we did the same thing the following day on Sunday, and that was pretty much it. Oh yes, and the best part, what I really enjoyed is, once we'd wrapped up all of our canvassing sessions, we would rendezvous back to the nearest pub or an agreed meeting place where we would all have a nice drink. We'd get to socialize and fraternize with one another. And there was even a karaoke bar event that we all attended on Sunday evening. I met lots of well-known, recognizable faces during this weekend hustings. Who did I see there? I saw that guy from Vox Populi. I forget his name. What was it? Will Coleshill, I think. I didn't recognize him at first, but when I saw his blue microphone, I recognized him. I saw Callum from Homeland. I used to be a member of Homeland, and I can link in the description a video that I appear in where I give my honest thoughts on the remigration conference, because we both attended the remigration conference. Yeah, it was a pleasure seeing him again. Let's see. Oh, there were a couple of lads from the Lotus Eaters that I saw there. There was Lucas, or was it Luca Fern? No. Lucas and Josh Fern. We saw both of them. It's a very strange feeling, I think, when you encounter somebody who up until then you've only seen on television or on the internet, because it immediately cuts. What immediately cuts to you is they're either taller or shorter than you expected them to be. That's the funny thing about meeting real-life people who, up until then, you've never actually met in person. It's a very strange feeling, and I remember over a decade ago, when I saw U2 live at their Innocence and Experience tour at the, what was it called? The O2 Arena. And I saw all of them. I had that very strange feeling again, because, media is... The way media glamorizes people, when you watch people through media, it's not the same as watching them in person. But anyway, there's a lot of, I can't really quite fully express what I'm trying to convey, but it's a strange feeling. But anyway, it was great seeing them live. Who else was there? Oh yeah, young Bob was there. He was wandering around with his phone, recording himself. I think recording a video log or something. Oh, of course, Rupert Lowe, the OG, the man of the hour, he was there. I managed to get a quick word with him. I even got my picture taken with him a couple of times. I've already posted that in a community note. I mentioned that I came all the way over from the Isle of Wight, and God, I can't even remember what he said. He was cheerful and he was grateful to me for having come all the way over. He was more or less exactly as I imagined he was, based on the interviews in which he conducted himself, the way he spoke, the things that he said. That's another thing I'd like to compound on top of what I mentioned earlier about meeting your real life heroes, meeting people who up until then you'd only seen on visual media. Meeting them in person is a jarring difference from having seen them on celluloid, seeing them on a TV screen. But on the other hand, what you see is largely what you get. If you watch somebody appear on YouTube or on TV, they behave a certain way, and then you encounter them in real life, you're not looking at an act. That is just how they are. Anyway, I'm just waffling, but it was a pleasure seeing Rupert Lowe there. I also saw our candidate, Rebecca Shepherd. I shook her by the hand and everything and wished her the best of luck. There was also Orla Minihane. She had great fun at the karaoke event. Oh goodness, the karaoke event. There's a lot that I can say about that. Yeah, there were lots of people. Oh, and there were even 2 journalists for the Telegraph who wanted to conduct an interview with me. If I can find footage of the interview that they recorded with me, I will. I'll link it to you. So far, I haven't been able to find it. I guess it hasn't been uploaded yet, or maybe they just decided I wasn't interesting enough. Who can say, right? It'll be interesting. I can say to all my mates, look, guys, I've been on TV. I'm with the press. Anyway, oh yes, the karaoke event. That was great fun. I had a fantastic time. I sang Small Town Boy by Bronski Beat, and I had myself a jolly old time. I had so much alcohol to drink, a bit more than I should have, in all honesty. By the following morning, when I woke up, I was woozy, and I'd arrived late to the hustings rendezvous point, and I ended up having to fall in with a different group. But what I really liked about the culture of the event is that because we were all united by a common purpose, by a common set of shared values, because we were all there for the same reason, we were all united in our cause to restore Britain and do the best we could to secure Rebecca Shepherd's chances of raking in high polling figures for the by-election. We were all looking out for each other. So I came all the way up there entirely on my own. I didn't bring a car with me or anything. So luckily there were lots of people who offered to carpool with me. And that's why we were all grouped up into groups of 5. One of us who would have a car would be driving us around, and we would all be carpooling together, and then we'd all double back to base and have a drink together, and it was great. You know, I didn't feel alone or isolated. I felt like I was part of a big movement where everyone was respected and everyone had things in common, and it was a great feeling. We were all united in our struggle. Now, I've spoken about basically what happened, what I did, etc. But what are my honest thoughts on the by-election? Do I think we're going to win? Well, in my honest opinion, I'm afraid I don't think we're going to win. Most likely what I think will happen is Andy Burnham, Labour, they will win. I don't know what what percentage of the vote share they will get. It may be 25%, it may be 30%. Reform will certainly get a large share of the vote as well. They will probably come second place. And at most, I think we at Restore Britain will get around 10% maybe. I'm thinking it'll be closer to 8%, which is not bad, but sadly, I'm afraid the existence of 2 simultaneously competing right-wing parties means inevitably there will be a split in the vote, which will allow Andy Burnham to win. And I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that's just how I see it. I was campaigning across 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I went on 4 different canvassing trips. And in all, I must have been touring around somewhere between 15 and 20 different residential streets, avenues, and housing estates. And each time I saw a fairly consistent pattern. The houses which had the most signage indicating that they were voting a political party, the biggest amount of visible support that I saw in Makerfield was for reform. There were plenty of wooden signposts saying vote reform, lots of posters out front. Followed by a somewhat distant margin, the next most popular was Labour. And it's funny because all the signs saying vote Andy for us, that's what they said, they had this cartoon, this low resolution cartoon image of Andy in that ridiculous, cheap, tacky Globo Homo art style, which honestly, I don't think it's a bad look. I think it suits him perfectly, because Andy Burnham, at the end of the day, he's been a part of the Labour Party and, you know, the neoliberal consensus for decades now. He was the mayor of Manchester for quite a while. He is, even though he hasn't been a Labour Party politician, he's still heavily intertwined with the Labour Party, and he is definitely part of the machine. Both the Labour and the Tories, everything that they represent, he represents the two-party consensus. And what does the two-party consensus stand for exactly? Well, managed decline. The same managerial bureaucracy and steady decline that we witness everywhere in the world. And it ranges from everything to, you know, ugly, gaudy, brutalist buildings, or cheap, tacky new builds, which they're cramming all these foreigners in. Litter on the side of the road. Sadly, I did see a lot of that when I was wandering around Wigan. Oversimplified logos that big corporations have. And, of course, the Globo Homo art style. It's like if you ever open up Google and there's a special event going on, or you take on a training course for this new company which you've just joined. That's the kind of art style that I saw that Andy Burnham poster for, and really, it suits him. I don't think he could deserve anything better. And if that's what people genuinely want to vote for, if that's what the constituents of Makerfield believe represents the future of their constituency, if that's what they think will help them, well, God help them, I say. But anyway, every democracy gets the leadership it deserves, right? Now, my actual experience on the ground. Oh yeah, and there were some Restore Britain. It was always a delight seeing the wooden signpost that said, "We're voting Restore Britain." There was even a video that Lucas from Lotus Eaters showed on Twitter, where he'd come across this street, which previously had nothing but reform signage, and then in the next shot, all the reform signs had been taken down and replaced with Restore Britain. That's a pleasant thing to see. I'm glad that that's happened. Although, anyway, even though, as I conceded, I still don't think we're going to make it. Now, what was my actual experience like on the ground, talking with real people? Well, most people were not in their houses. I made a point of each house that I went up to, I would knock or ring the doorbell at least twice, on the off chance that that they were just in bed or they weren't able to hear me properly. But the overwhelming majority of respondents in our checklist didn't answer the door because they either weren't in, or perhaps they got sick and tired of all the political canvassing, that they just had enough and they wanted to check out. And I remember joking about this with my other crew, with my canvassing crew, saying if there was a party called the No Answer Party, they would win by a significantly huge margin. So yes, most of the residents didn't answer the door. Then there were a number of residents who, I don't know whether this is because they were voting Labour or because they just weren't interested, but they would politely tell me, "Sorry, no thank you, we're not interested," and they would close the door. And speaking as somebody who, throughout his life, has been quite shy and averse to conflict, I took this a lot better than I expected I would. I think the key difference is when you're working towards a tangible goal and you're surrounded and you're with a group of friends, of people who you trust, who are on your side, it puts everything in perspective, because you understand that in politics, rejection is inevitable. You just got to take these things in stride. And I must have gotten, what, half of 100, maybe more people who said, yeah, no, sorry, we're not interested. None of them were outright abusive. None of them told me to fuck off. Or nobody physically assaulted me. Although I've heard that there was one person who I was canvassing with who was literally told to get out, and one guy who literally came charging out of his front door, and his wife had to physically restrain him, say, "I'm not voting for you lot, you fascists." I've heard that happen, but luckily I never personally experienced it. I won't discount that experience. I guess maybe it does happen, but luckily the overwhelming majority of people I spoke to were good-natured and polite. Like, they had differences in opinion, sure. Even the Labour Party voters who I spoke to, even they took the time to sit and chat with me about the future of the country. And none of them turned me, quite a few of them did not turn me away or slam the door in my face or tell me to leave when I announced who I was canvassing on behalf of and what Restore Britain's policies were. And it's strange, sometimes I get the impression that a lot of Labour Party voters don't even know what Labour stands for. They just have this naive, idealistic notion that Labour represent the working class, as their name branding suggests. And maybe they're just not clued up on the political situation. Maybe they only get all their news, maybe they get all their information from, I don't know, whether it's the tabloids or whether it's just vibes. People can roll their eyes and say, how is it possible in this day and age that there are still people who don't use social media or who haven't heard of political developments on X? Because there's got to be tens of millions of people on X. I know it sounds incredible, but I met these people. I spoke with them. They're still there. They're mostly the middle-aged or elderly generation, but they are a significantly large margin. And if you want to be taken seriously at the ballot box, you have to engage with these people. You mustn't talk down to them. You mustn't insult them or patronize them. Listen to what they say, and try and meet them in the middle. Try and agree with them wherever you can. And they will do the same to you. You may yet be able to win them over. The most hope that I had was speaking with the voters who were undecided, and there were quite a few voters who just weren't sure who to vote for. And when I told them who I was campaigning for, when I told them what Restore Britain's main policies were, and I showed them a pamphlet, they nodded their heads with curiosity. They seemed very interested in what I was telling them. Perhaps I did a good job in trying to spin our party's message with them. I don't know, maybe I have the gift of the gab. I guess if you watch my videos enough, maybe you can second that opinion or not. But I get the impression that the only reason why Restore Britain isn't already taking over the world by storm, isn't taking over Britain by storm, is because most people just aren't that clued up on politics. Most people have no reason to get politically involved. Most people, there's a large, surprising number of people who just live their lives without much of a thought or care for what goes on in the world, and there's nothing wrong with that, I met some really sweet middle-aged ladies who liked and agreed with everything we stood for, and the only problem is, I have a feeling that due to the way that the media conditions them, if they see the coverage that we get on the press, they might be deconditioned and reprogrammed into voting elsewhere. But that's just how people are, and that's just the way the system works, you know, and we got to grapple with it. But there were some people who were incredibly enthusiastically receptive towards our message. And I'll never forget that. There was one lady by the name of Natalie. I'm not going to give her an actual address. She lived along a road called Sandy Lane. I had a conversation with her that may have lasted between 5 and 10 minutes, and ordinarily we try to keep these things short so that we can move on to the next house and keep on delivering leaflets. But moments like this, where you form an actual connection with members of the general public, when you convince them that you and they both want the same thing, they're really meaningful, I think. And I came up to Makerfield because I wanted to see what the on-the-ground situation was, what actual ordinary constituents think and what they feel. And I'm glad to say I think I have a relatively good idea now. There's a lot of people I spoke to who weren't happy with Andy Burnham because apparently when he was mayor of Manchester, he implemented all of these 20-mile-an-hour speed limits signs and these cameras which would snap pictures of you, the very same system that they have in Wales, apparently. And from what I hear, I don't know how true this is because I haven't looked into it, but apparently his wife has a share in the company that produces these cameras or these, you know, that implements these speed limit cameras. I don't know, that's just what I've been told, and I've heard it from at least more than one person. And the Reform voters too, I got the opportunity to speak with some of them. Now, there are some people on the campaign trail who like to engage in dialogue with Reform voters and convince them, no, you're making a mistake. Why are you voting for Reform and not us? The thing is, though, I'm not like that. I don't like talking down to people. I don't like being in a position where I have to argue with people and say, you're making the wrong choice, because we all vote according to our conscience and our own principles. If you're the impression I got from a lot of Reform voters is that they were sympathetic to basically all of our talking points. Like most of them agreed that Restore Britain was the better of the two options, and they liked Rupert Lowe and would vote for him under normal circumstances. The problem is, though, they just didn't think that we were ready yet. They thought that we would be splitting the vote. And I hate to admit this, but based on my own lived experience, based on the 3 days I spent campaigning, I'm afraid they have reason to believe that, because it looks like that's what's going to happen. Yes, it does seem like Andy Burnham will win the upcoming election, and we will be snatching votes away from Reform, which could otherwise snatch away a potential Labour constituency and thwart Andy Burnham's plan in taking over the Labour Party and ousting Keir Starmer from number 10. But that's all that is just, it's not even a difference in opinion, it's just a difference in methodology. But we're all on the same team. And I never got any hostility or indifference from these people. It was a pleasure talking to them. They know what the real problems affecting this country are. They see what's going on. They believe rather that the better thing to do would be to get on board Farage's train until the time is right. And that's the trouble with being in a democracy, is that sometimes tactical voting is a well-known strategy that people will engage in. It's a highly flawed system, but that's just how people's minds work. That being said, though, there were some people who, according to their own principles, were going to vote Restore Britain anyway, in spite of that. One chap I spoke to, I forget the name of the road or the lane, he told me he was a roofer. You know, he was a I tell you this, he was a stereotypical northern working class man. You know, he had a bald head. He was rough around the edges. Yes, I can indeed confirm now that the northern stereotype is real. I've encountered friendly older ladies, people like Jane Horrocks, or what are some other northerners that I know of? Well, you know, people who look like football coaches, and hold on, sorry, light went out. And I had an interesting conversation with a chap in the pub who looked just like this. I had this vague idea before coming up north of what I thought I would encounter. You know, some guy who's slightly overweight with a balding, you know, completely bald, who looked like an off-duty football coach. I met several people who looked like that. And I want you to know, there are northerners who watch my channel. I don't have any prejudice against them, but, you know, I think it's wonderful how we all have our own regional stereotypes. And these are real people with real stories and real lived experiences. And it was a pleasure chatting with them. The guy in question, Lloyd, that was his name, the guy I met in the pub, he got annoyed with the way I spoke, because he said I spoke too loudly, which I thought was rather unusual. I was trying to talk loudly to get my point across to him, because I was worried that hold on. Let me just see if I can phrase this right. I was worried that other people might be listening in on our conversation. But anyway, he took issue with the tone of language. He was saying, "Mate, you don't need to speak like that. You're in the north. We all say what we like around here." And then the funniest thing is, a couple of minutes later, this female server working at the pub, who was slightly overweight, she had a short haircut, and she had this rainbow-coloured lanyard. She came up to me and told us off for talking politics. Anyway, I went completely off topic, but this other guy, this other northern chap who I spoke to, the roofer, the hard grafter, also with a bald head, he after speaking with him for a couple of minutes, he told me, yes, I'm 100% with you guys, and so are my daughters. I have 2 daughters, and they're both voting Restore Britain as well. And another thing I noticed is it's mostly Restore Britain appears to have significant outreach with the younger generation. Most of the houses I spoke to, most of the middle-aged folk, they didn't even know about us and who we were. And that's not surprising, because the mainstream media has worked overtime to keep Rupert Lowe and Restore Britain out of the limelight. We weren't even invited to appear on BBC Question Time. But we have a tremendous online following on social media. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. You would not believe the momentum that we have on X. Elon Musk, I mean, he's certainly on board the Rupert Lowe and Restore train. So I will wrap this up by saying, even though I don't think we're going to win, I think most likely Andy Burnham will come out on top. Nigel Farage will make a big song and dance and saying, Rupert Lowe and his bloody right-wing vanity project, he stole our vote, and that's completely unacceptable. He just handed Labour the vote on a silver platter, which is not what we want. Well, however he talks. Sorry, that was a rubbish impression, but you know. And yes, we will be panned by people saying that we're stealing the vote, but the way I see it is, you got to lose the battle to win the war. And that's what we're trying to win. We're not just trying to win simple by-elections. We're trying to change the conversation and get people talking. We want to bring to the fore the issues that are really salient with the general public, like the rape gangs. The results of the rape gang inquiry itself is going to be released sometime next week after the by-election's been concluded. We're gonna talk about the real second-order consequences of mass immigration, how it's triggered a whole cascade of negative effects like the housing crisis, the NHS waiting list, the rise in crime. I mean, for God's sake, the man who almost got beheaded in Belfast recently. Are we going to pretend that mass immigration didn't lead to that happening? The killing of Henry Novak, the continued injustices that we all face, that the very fact that by 2060 we white British will become dispossessed of our homeland. We will lose our majority share of the population in the country that created us. Sometimes you can't have everything you want right away. You have to be patient and play the long game. And that's what I think we're there to do. Even if we don't win the Makerfield by-election, I think we will do better than people think we will. And we will get people talking. Mark my words, Restore Britain isn't going away anytime soon. Even the people who've never heard of us, and there certainly were many of those, they're going to start seeing us appear more and more in the news, because we ain't going away. We're not going anywhere. The media will catch up with our campaign. What's that old adage? First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they try to destroy you, and then you win. We're at the first stage so far. There's 3 more to go. And also, what have Reform been doing? Has anyone been paying attention to how their policies on deportations have pivoted over the course of months? Nigel Farage was very clear on the record when he appeared on that interview with Stephen Edgington, saying, no, I've no interest in mass deportations. It's just simply not feasible. And he doesn't want to alienate the Islamic community. But only just recently, he's put out a soundbite saying he's going to deport all immigrants who live in social housing. Except, of course, it's a half measure, because he's not going to deport them right away. He's going to give them 3 months to find their own accommodation, which they can use, which they can pay for. Otherwise, they'll be deported. Really, at that point, Rupert Lowe, from the beginning, has said he plans on deporting foreign nationals living in social housing. The very idea that there should be foreigners living in social housing is an insult. And, oh, by the way, I didn't even mention, I met them. I encountered foreigners living in houses in social housing during my canvassing trips. It was ridiculous. There were Polish people who answered the door when I walked up to working class housing estates, and they said, sorry, I not speak English. Or Africans and Indians. It's absolutely ridiculous. I still gave them a pamphlet for Restore Britain anyway, though, because I thought it would be funny, and I didn't really care. It's not like we're trying to court their vote anyway. But how long are we going to pretend that this is normal, or that this is something that should be tolerated? And that is what we're there for. We are there to set the agenda, to set the tone, and steer the conversation towards where we want it to be. You don't need to win elections to win the battle of ideas. That's what I think we're there for. And I'd like to wrap this up by saying I have tremendous respect for all the brave individuals who travelled all across the country to campaign on behalf of Restore Britain. We all did a fantastic job. We did the best we could to reach as many people as possible. We had a much greater ground game than any of the other parties there. We were well organized. We were superbly well motivated. I think no matter what happens, people are going to talk about us, and there's no way that our well coordinated efforts aren't going to be noticed. We will lose, but we will lose gracefully. We will lose in a way so that people will turn their heads towards us. Restore Britain isn't a flash in the pan. We're not going anywhere anytime soon. We're going to get bigger and bigger. We are going to exploit a niche in the market that shouldn't even exist in the first place. We're going to put Reform under pressure to actually play the part of the real opposition, or at least pretend to be the real opposition by plagiarizing our policies, because that's exactly what they've been doing, mark my words. We're gonna expose the ordinary people to the ideological incoherence of Reform, saying that they want to deport foreign nationals, yet on the other hand, they've literally been having foreign nationals, immigrants from Bangladesh, stand in council elections in places like Portsmouth, or going out canvassing and leafleting for votes. Or the fact that they have no wish to alienate Islam, the fact that they have a mayoral candidate for London who's a practicing Muslim, and their chairman is a Muslim, yet they want to restore British values. They want to save British values without taking on the bull by the horns. I think in the days coming forward, the people will wake up and see that Nigel Farage is a lying coward and a grifter and a narcissist who's just in it for his own vanity, but he's not really interested. He doesn't have the best interest of this country at heart. But Rupert Lowe does. Restore Britain does. And it's down to us to show and demonstrate to the people that that is the truth. Anyway, it's been quite a long video, but anyway, those are my honest thoughts on the Makerfield by-election. We did the best we could, and whatever happens this Thursday, I will sit back in the comfort of knowing that I did a damn fine job, and so did everyone else who turned up there. This has been Tracking. You guys take care, everyone. Godspeed.